Hi, Eric here with 30 by 40 Design Workshop. Today I want to talk a little bit about the Dogtrot as a floor plan archetype and the evolution of the Longhouse Dogtrot series. We'll discuss that in more detail. So we'll begin by talking a little bit about the evolution of the Dogtrot as a floor plan style. Most people think it started in the South, but actually it was brought to this country to modern day Pennsylvania and New Jersey by the Swedish and Finnish settlers of that area. They were very skilled at working with log constructions, and the local resources in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, obviously it was a heavily wooded area, so they had lots of logs available to them. So their early homes there were built using logs. And if you're familiar with how a log cabin is constructed, it's basically stacked up logs. Now the sizes of those cabins were dictated by a couple of things. The first thing was the length of log that a team of men and their oxen could actually lift into place. Logs are pretty heavy things, and so lifting them without the use of mechanical equipment was pretty difficult. So the length of log was very important. Now the other reason why the length of log was important was because the longer a log gets, so if you have your tree here, the taller a tree gets, the more of a difference in diameter there is between one section of a log and the other section of a log. So really, you want to size your logs that you're going to be using in a cabin to optimally limit the amount of taper from one end of the log to the other. Now this allows you to stack up even sections and layers of logs into the log cabin without having to sort of puzzle piece it together and without ending up with a sort of irregular or out of level house. Now these cabins were pretty diminutive in scale and size, and when the family would require more space, they would outgrow this cabin, they would have to add on to this. Now the way a log cabin works is the exterior walls are structural, so you can't just cut holes in any location and sort of add on as we typically might today with stick framing. What these settlers did was they actually created another one of these cabins, and they spaced it one log length away usually. And what this did was created a pair cottage. They often referred to these as cottages. So this was the second in the pair, creating the pair cottage. Now what this did for them was it provided them more space, and so they made this cabin here. They didn't just roof this over as a separate building. What they did was they roofed over the connection point too, between the two cottages. So now they were left with one building that had an outdoor covered breezeway or dogtrot. So this space here is the outdoor space between the cottages adjoining them. Now some would actually floor that over, and it was fairly common to do that, create a floor level in here, so the inside floor of this cabin and the inside floor of this cabin were on one level. Others would omit the floor, and they would actually use this as a place to pull their wagons in and out, and they could repair them, out of the elements. This created a really useful indoor-outdoor space. It was a porch, it was an entry, it was a circulation connection point, it was covered, protected from the elements. And in the north, this worked out very well. Now, in the south, and the evolution of this plan type in the north, as I described it, is pretty commonly held as being historically accurate. In the south, in that you would build one cottage, and the second cottage would come as an addition later, and the roofed connector would be a result of that second addition. In the south, it's likely that these cabins were actually built at the same time. And one would typically house the kitchen and the dining areas, and we'd have a chimney here, typically. And the other would house the private living quarters, the sleeping functions. So it separated these two out. Now the adoption in the South in this regard was really important because the Northerners couldn't fully appreciate all the advantages that the Dogtrot offered. Now, this area, which we call the breezeway or the Dogtrot, actually had this really interesting passive cooling effect. If we assume that this is the compass, and this is north, and this is south, the prevailing wind direction in the south is out of the south. So all of our breezes are coming from the south. Now what this did was, this breezeway actually channeled and focused these breezes, allowing them to come through this sort of shady outdoor space. And when the settlers had a door or a window that was positioned opening onto the Dogtrot, these breezes would actually draw the hot, stale air from inside the cabin out through the breezeway and passively cool both structures. Now the advantage to separating the functions here was the kitchen is usually a warmer space. It's got all the cooking, the heat from cooking and all of the smells from cooking. And so this passive ventilation strategy would naturally keep this space, would naturally cool this space, but it would also keep all of the heat and the smells out of the private living quarters. This porch area ended up being a gathering spot, and it actually didn't impact the views or the light that you could get from any of these cabins. You'll know if you put a porch on, typically a porch on the side of a house, you're actually blocking a lot of light. By placing the porch between the two cabins to the side, you're able to use all of this exterior wall as a place to collect light for the inside of the cabin. So it's an overall brighter space. It's an overall cooler space because of the passive cooling aspects. And this center space becomes this multifunctional indoor-outdoor room. So that's the genesis and the thinking behind the original Dogtrot floor plans.